The dim lighting of La Belle Cuisine cast a soft, warm glow across the room, its elegance punctuated by crisp white tablecloths and the quiet hum of private conversations. It was a restaurant known for its exclusivity, its reputation built on impeccable service and exceptional cuisine. But tonight, the scene would unfold differently. Lisa Johnson stepped inside, a casual figure cloaked in simplicity, dark jeans, a loose sweater, and a worn leather jacket. She wasn't the glamorous, high-profile food critic that most expected. Instead, she blended in, quietly taking in the atmosphere without drawing attention. She was used to being unnoticed in places like this, to sitting in the shadows of the dining room where no one would recognize her for the power her pen held. Amanda, the young waitress, took one look at her and instantly sized her up. She had been working at La Belle Cuisine for 2 years now, and her judgmental eye had become sharp, especially when it came to certain clients. Lisa didn't fit the usual mold of the restaurant's clientele. She wasn't dressed in designer clothes or dripping with luxury. She was just another face in the crowd. "You can follow me," Amanda said, her tone flat, barely disguising the condescension. Lisa offered a polite smile, nodding as she followed Amanda through the restaurant. She was accustomed to being treated with indifference, and for a moment, she thought nothing of it. But when Amanda led her to a small, isolated table in the farthest corner of the room, the lack of respect became clear. "Here you go," Amanda said, throwing a napkin on the table with unnecessary force. "It's a bit out of the way, but we're very full tonight." Lisa suppressed the urge to speak up. Instead, she sat quietly, noting the dismissive gesture. As Amanda walked away, she felt the weight of the words that had been left unsaid. It was the first sign of something off, but Lisa, ever the professional, kept her thoughts to herself. She wasn't here to stir trouble. Not yet, at least. Minutes passed. No one came to take her drink order, despite the fact that the other tables were being served swiftly. Lisa scanned the room, watching the attentive service the regulars received. A woman in an expensive red dress was offered a glass of champagne before she even sat down. Her companion greeted with a smile that lit up the room. The difference in treatment was stark. When Amanda finally returned, it was with a look of barely contained disdain. "Are you ready to order?" she asked, her tone clipped. There was no warmth in her voice, no sense of welcome. Just the cold efficiency of a server eager to get through the motions. Lisa looked up, meeting Amanda's eyes for the first time. "Yes, I'll have the foie gras to start," Lisa replied, keeping her voice calm and steady. "And the duck breast for the main course. I'll also have a glass of your house red." Amanda's lips curled in a tight, almost mocking smile. "Is that all?" she asked, clearly expecting Lisa to ask for more. The question felt more like an insult than a genuine inquiry. "That will be fine," Lisa said, her smile remaining in place, though the subtle unease in Amanda's eyes didn't escape her notice. As Amanda turned to leave, Lisa caught a glimpse of her whispering to a fellow waiter nearby, casting a quick glance in her direction. The sense of being judged intensified. She was used to it, of course, the silent scrutiny, the assumptions people made about her based on her appearance. But it stung all the same, and she could feel herself growing more aware of the unease creeping in, the tension building as the restaurant's icy indifference wrapped around her like a cloak. Lisa leaned back in her chair, watching the room. It wasn't just the treatment from Amanda that was bothering her. It was the quiet, unspoken understanding that seemed to permeate the restaurant. The servers walked past her table without a glance, their eyes fixed firmly ahead, avoiding her. It was as if she were invisible, or worse, as if she didn't belong. She felt it in the way the other diners subtly looked away when her gaze met theirs. The collective judgment of a woman who didn't meet the standards of their class, their type. The whispers, the glances, the disdain. It was all too familiar, but it didn't make it any easier to endure. The food arrived in due course, the foie gras an artful presentation of golden, silky smooth perfection. Amanda placed the dish in front of Lisa without a word, her hands stiff with discomfort. But as soon as Amanda was out of sight, Lisa began to make mental notes. She took a delicate bite of the foie gras, tasting the richness of it, the complexity of the flavor, but it was hard to concentrate. The tension in the air was palpable. A few minutes later, Amanda returned with the duck breast, placing it on the table with almost mechanical precision. No smile, no small talk, just the platitude of a worker trying to get through another shift without incident. "Anything else?" Amanda asked, her words cold and clipped as she stood with arms folded, barely concealing the thinly veiled contempt in her posture. "No, thank you. I'm fine," Lisa replied, the smile still there, though it was beginning to feel less like politeness and more like an act of survival. Amanda stood there for a moment longer than necessary, as if waiting for something, for Lisa to flinch, for her to apologize for taking up space in the restaurant. But Lisa didn't flinch. Instead, she ate, taking her time with each bite, savoring the food despite the atmosphere. Every forkful of duck was a small victory, a reminder that the meal, at least, was still something to appreciate. The evening wore on, but the service did not improve. Amanda was nowhere to be seen when Lisa needed a refill of water, and when she finally did return, it was with a dismissive look. The tension between them built in silence, growing thicker with each minute. Finally, the check arrived. Amanda dropped it onto the table without a word. No pleasantries, no thank you for dining, just the quiet sting of her judgment, packed into a small piece of paper. Lisa unfolded the bill, noting how the amount seemed oddly inflated for the meal she had just had. Nothing spectacular, nothing out of the ordinary. The servers, it seemed, had already written her off as someone unworthy of their best efforts. But Lisa knew something Amanda didn't. As she reached into her bag, she retrieved her business card, her real business card, the one with her name in bold print. Lisa Johnson, Food Critic Gourmet Elite. She placed the card on top of the check. Amanda's eyes immediately widened, her expression faltering for the briefest moment before her mask of arrogance slipped back into place. You're, Amanda started, her voice faltering as the realization hit her like a freight train. "I am," Lisa said softly, her voice laced with a quiet authority that made Amanda shrink back slightly. The transformation in Amanda's face was instantaneous, her smugness replaced by a look of panic. It was the first crack in her carefully constructed demeanor. The silence between them stretched for a moment, the weight of the words unspoken settling heavily in the air. Finally, Amanda managed to squeak out, I didn't know." Lisa's gaze remained steady, her voice calm but firm. "Clearly you didn't?" The moment had arrived. The humiliation that Lisa had endured for the last hour was not to be forgotten. It wasn't just about the bad service or the cold treatment. It was about the system that allowed such behavior to go unchecked. And Lisa would make sure it was addressed. "Get the manager," she said, her words as sharp as the blade of a knife. The manager arrived quickly, though the nervousness was evident in his every step. Lisa had already seen the look of panic in Amanda's eyes, but the sight of the manager's face as he approached made her even more certain of her observation. This restaurant was a house of cards, ready to collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. The manager, a man in his late 40s with graying hair and an expensive-looking suit, looked like someone who had spent decades in the business, polished, confident, but now, utterly unprepared for the storm brewing at his door. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, his voice polite but strained. "I'm Richard, the manager here. I understand you've had some concerns." Lisa's gaze was sharp, her tone deliberate. "Concerns? Let's call it what it is. Failure to do your job. A blatant disregard for service. And an even worse lack of respect for your customers." Richard flinched slightly at her words, but he kept his professional mask in place. "I'm very sorry to hear that. I assure you, we pride ourselves on offering the best experience possible. Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Lisa pointed at the table. "Start with this. My meal arrived cold. The foie gras was barely edible, and the duck breast was overcooked. But I can overlook that. What I cannot overlook is how I was treated by your staff." Richard's eyes flickered to Amanda, who was standing near the kitchen entrance, her head lowered, still attempting to avoid eye contact. She knew what was coming. "You should be aware that the service here was nothing short of insulting," Lisa continued. "And that's not just about the food, it's about how I was treated the moment I walked in. The cold, dismissive attitude, the lack of attention, the belief that I didn't belong here. The manager's gaze darted toward Amanda again. "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am. I can't speak for my staff's actions, but we take customer feedback seriously. I'll personally investigate this." Lisa let the silence hang in the air for a moment, watching as the manager shifted uncomfortably. She could feel Amanda's eyes on her, the young woman's guilt radiating like a cloud. But this wasn't just about one individual. It was about a system of arrogance and entitlement, one that allowed this kind of behavior to go unchecked. "You'll investigate?" Lisa repeated, her voice growing colder. "What does that mean?" "You'll talk to her for 5 minutes, maybe apologize for the inconvenience, and then pretend like nothing happened? That's not good enough." Richard's discomfort deepened, and his eyes flicked toward Amanda again, this time with a harder edge. "I assure you, I will take this matter seriously." "Amanda, would you like to explain what happened?" Amanda hesitated, clearly aware that every second of silence was only making the situation worse. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her face flushed with the kind of shame that only someone caught in a lie could feel. But after a long beat, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know who she was," Amanda muttered, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. I didn't think she would care about the service. She didn't look like the type of person who would, you know." Lisa's eyes narrowed, the words cutting deeper than they should have. "And that's your excuse? Judging people based on how they look? How pathetic. How incredibly small-minded." Amanda's face turned even redder, her eyes cast downward as if hoping the floor would swallow her up. Lisa could see the tears welling up, the raw emotion barely contained behind Amanda's feigned indifference. It was the kind of reaction that made Lisa question how often this kind of thing happened, how many others had suffered under the same dismissive treatment, simply because they didn't meet the arbitrary standards set by the people working here. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Amanda muttered, her voice cracking as the reality of the situation hit her. "No," Lisa replied sharply, her voice unwavering. "You didn't mean to hurt anyone, but you did. And that's the problem. You're too busy judging who deserves respect, instead of giving it to everyone." Richard, who had remained mostly silent until now, cleared his throat. "Look, I'm really sorry for the way you were treated, and I can assure you, this will be addressed immediately. Amanda, I expect a full apology." Amanda nodded, but said nothing. Her apology came too late, and Lisa wasn't sure she even believed it. It was hard to take anything she said seriously when the same person had judged her based solely on her appearance. Lisa felt no need to accept a half-hearted apology from someone who hadn't even begun to understand the true weight of her actions. Lisa leaned forward, her voice calm, but with an edge. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone's life, Richard. I came here to enjoy a meal. But what you've shown me tonight is a reflection of the problems that run deeper in this place. This isn't about Amanda. This is about a culture that allows behavior like this to persist. You can fire her, but that won't solve the problem. She's not the only one at fault." Richard looked torn, his hand rubbing the back of his neck as he processed her words. "What do you suggest, then?" he asked, his voice strained. "What should we do?" Lisa's eyes met Amanda's for a brief moment. There was nothing left in the young woman's face but shame. But Lisa was no longer interested in crushing her entirely. She wasn't there for revenge. She was there for change. "You need to do more than fire her," Lisa said slowly. "You need a complete overhaul of how you train your staff. A training program focused on diversity and inclusion. A program that teaches people like Amanda to respect everyone, regardless of what they wear, where they come from, or what they look like." The words landed like a slap, and Amanda visibly winced. But Lisa wasn't done. "You need to change your attitude, Richard. This isn't just about one bad employee. It's about creating an environment where customers are valued, not judged. Where people aren't treated like they don't belong just because they aren't part of your elite little circle." There was a long silence. The restaurant, which had once felt so full of life, now seemed eerily quiet. The tension between them hung heavy, and Lisa could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. But she wasn't backing down. Richard took a deep breath, finally looking her in the eye. "I understand. You have my word. We will implement the necessary changes." starting with mandatory diversity training for the entire staff. Lisa nodded, her voice softening just a fraction. I'll be keeping an eye on this place, and I won't hesitate to make sure everyone knows whether or not you follow through. With that, she stood up from the table, leaving behind her meal, untouched, but knowing she had already achieved something greater. Something that could, just maybe, make a difference. Amanda didn't say anything as Lisa left. She simply stood there, staring at the ground, the weight of her actions settling around her like a shadow she couldn't escape. The manager, on the other hand, simply nodded, clearly relieved that the storm had passed for now. But for Lisa, the real work had just begun. The air in the restaurant seemed to change the moment Lisa stepped through the door again. This time, she was no longer just an anonymous customer. Her presence was felt even before she walked in. The reputation she had built with her sharp critique and discerning eye for detail preceded her. And despite her best efforts to remain under the radar, she had unknowingly set the wheels of change into motion. It had been 2 weeks since her last visit. The manager had followed through with his promise to implement the mandatory diversity and inclusion training for the entire staff. She wasn't expecting miracles overnight, but she was curious to see if the changes had been genuinely embraced or if they had just been a temporary patch to appease her. Lisa had made her reservation for that night, this time under her real name. She didn't want to give the staff any excuses to pretend they didn't know who she was. She'd waited a few days just to let things settle. It would be a test, not just for the restaurant, but for the entire team. As soon as she entered, the hostess looked up from the podium, offering her a polite smile, but there was a flash of recognition in her eyes. She had been there the night of the incident, and Lisa saw a flicker of nervousness in her gaze. The young woman quickly adjusted her posture, pulling out a menu and leading Lisa to a table near the center of the room. The decor of La Belle Cuisine had always been stunning. The soft glow of chandeliers casting elegant shadows on the walls, the subtle hum of conversation mixed with the clinking of silverware and glasses. But tonight, Lisa didn't feel the same thrill she had the first time she had visited. It wasn't about the food. It wasn't about the ambience. Tonight, everything felt like it was under a microscope. The table was well lit, and the atmosphere, as usual, was bustling with well-dressed patrons enjoying their meals. Lisa could hear the soft laughter of a couple at the neighboring table, the tinkling of wine glasses being refilled, and the occasional hum of conversation from the waitstaff as they rushed past. But she wasn't here to appreciate the usual charms. She was here for something more. Minutes passed, and Lisa was still scanning the room, waiting. She wasn't sure if she was looking for a sign of progress, or if she was just hoping the place had learned from the previous incident. Then Amanda appeared. At first, Lisa wasn't sure if she had seen correctly. Amanda was standing by the kitchen door, her uniform crisp, her posture straighter than the last time. She was watching the room carefully, scanning the guests and engaging with them in ways that felt more controlled, more intentional. When their eyes met, Amanda froze for a moment, her face flushing briefly. But this time, there was no defiance in her eyes, only apprehension. The young woman hesitated before walking over to Lisa's table. Lisa could feel the weight of her nervous energy in the air as Amanda approached, but there was something else there, too, something that hadn't been present before. Lisa could sense the shift. Perhaps Amanda had learned something from the training. Perhaps she was trying to live up to the change that had been promised. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome back to La Belle Cuisine," Amanda said, her voice tentative but courteous. Lisa studied her for a moment. Her posture was still a little stiff, and the smile was a little forced, but the words were different. The change was palpable in the way Amanda spoke. She wasn't looking down at the floor anymore. Her gaze was steady, respectful. "Thank you," Lisa replied, her tone neutral. "I'm looking forward to seeing how things have improved since my last visit." Amanda nodded quickly, a slight flush creeping up her neck. I hope you'll see a difference." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "I don't think I'm here just for hope." Amanda's face went pale, but she quickly recovered, clearly determined not to let herself fall into the same mistakes. "I understand, ma'am," she said, her voice softer. "I know we let you down last time. I'm here to make sure you have a better experience tonight." There was a moment of silence, but Lisa wasn't in a hurry to fill it. She studied Amanda's face, searching for any sign of insincerity, any trace of the arrogance she had displayed before. But there was none. There was only vulnerability, a humbling self-awareness that, though awkward, was an honest attempt at redemption. "I'm listening," Lisa said, leaning slightly forward. "I'd like to hear how you plan on making this meal an experience, not just a service." Amanda blinked, caught off guard by the question. She hesitated for a moment, then cleared her throat. "I've been trying to learn more about the guests, about their needs. We were taught that each customer deserves to be treated with respect, no matter who they are or what they might look like. It's not just about the food. It's about creating a space where everyone feels welcome." Lisa nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "And do you believe that's enough?" she asked, her voice almost too calm. "Because what I saw before wasn't just an issue of food or service. It was a matter of fundamental respect. Can you say you've truly internalized that?" Amanda's hands trembled slightly as she set down the water glass, but she didn't flinch. I can't undo what happened before, but I promise I've been trying to change. I'm working on being more aware, more considerate." Lisa studied her for a moment longer before nodding. "That's all anyone can ask for," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "But words are only half of it. The real change comes when you take responsibility, not just with customers, but with yourself. You're not just serving food here, Amanda. You're serving people, and those people deserve to feel valued." Amanda swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with emotion, but she nodded. I understand. I won't forget this. I promise." Lisa watched her for a moment before leaning back in her chair. There was a part of her that still wondered if Amanda was just saying what she thought Lisa wanted to hear. But there was also a deeper part of her that saw the potential for real change, a flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this young woman was truly trying to break free from her old patterns. "Good," Lisa said finally. "Now, let's see if the food can live up to the service." The night progressed slowly, but with a tangible shift in the air. Amanda returned with the menu, and each course that arrived was met with a respectful, eager anticipation, as if the young woman had genuinely learned the weight of her actions. Her interactions with Lisa were careful but sincere, and the food, this time, was nearly flawless. As the evening wound to a close, Amanda came by one final time, her eyes more open than they had been the first time they met. "I just wanted to thank you," she said quietly, for not giving up on me." Lisa looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. "Don't thank me yet," she replied, her voice soft but resolute. "You still have a lot to prove. But this is a good start." Amanda nodded, her expression one of quiet determination. Lisa finished her meal, pushed back her chair, and stood up. As she did, she caught the manager's eye. Richard gave her a brief, nervous nod, clearly grateful that the storm had passed. Lisa wasn't sure if this would be enough to redeem the restaurant entirely, but it was a beginning, a step in the right direction. The restaurant was quieter now, the last guests finishing their meals. The lights were dimming, and the night was coming to a close. But Lisa knew that, in some ways, this was only the beginning of a much larger transformation. She walked out, her steps measured, her resolve unshaken. The changes she had sparked in that room, however small, were the first ripples in what might one day become a wave of true progress. The days after Lisa's visit to La Belle Cuisine felt like a strange sort of limbo. The restaurant, while still regarded as one of the finest in the city, had been altered in both visible and invisible ways. Lisa could feel the subtle shift in the air whenever she walked past the restaurant in the following weeks. An underlying tension, as if everyone within those walls was still waiting for some kind of judgment to fall. And, in a way, they were. But it wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about how they treated people, how they carried themselves under pressure, how they took responsibility for their actions. Lisa hadn't returned to the restaurant since that night, but she had kept an eye on the reviews and the murmurs from friends in the industry. From what she could tell, the training had been implemented. The staff had made visible efforts to be more courteous, to show respect to customers, regardless of their appearance. The manager, Richard, had even emailed her a personal thank you note for her feedback, acknowledging that things had been difficult, but that they were committed to doing better. But Lisa knew better than to take things at face value. She had been around long enough to see countless establishments try to pull the wool over the eyes of critics and customers. Words were easy. Actions, however, were far more difficult. It was a Tuesday afternoon when she received an unexpected invitation to return to the restaurant. Richard, in his usual diplomatic tone, asked if she would consider dining there again, this time as a guest of the restaurant, with no expectation of a review. He expressed a genuine desire to show her the changes they had made, not just for the public, but for themselves. "We want to show you we're serious," he had written. Lisa, for a moment, had considered ignoring the invitation. It wasn't about the food. It was about whether the place had truly learned. But curiosity gnawed at her, and with a sigh, she decided it was time to see how deep the changes went. If the restaurant had truly reformed, she would give them credit where it was due. If not, she would expose the cracks. She made a reservation, this time without any fanfare. She dressed in a simple blouse and jeans, choosing to keep her appearance as neutral as possible. No one needed to know who she was. This time, she wanted to see what would happen without her being the center of attention. The moment she entered La Belle Cuisine, there was a noticeable difference. The air felt lighter, but more importantly, the staff seemed more attentive, more focused. The hostess, who had been one of the ones to greet her harshly on her first visit, gave Lisa a warm smile. There was no hesitation in her step as she led Lisa to a table near the back of the room, where the ambience was quieter and more intimate. As Lisa settled in, she was greeted by the same server from her previous visit, Amanda. The change in Amanda was immediate and palpable. Her posture was straight, her smile genuine, and there was no trace of the condescending tone she had used before. She even remembered to ask if Lisa had any special dietary preferences without an ounce of the previously cold, dismissive attitude. "Good evening, Ms. Johnson," Amanda said, her voice confident, but still carrying a hint of reverence. "I'm glad to see you back with us tonight. I'll make sure everything is to your liking." Lisa gave a slight nod, watching Amanda carefully. Her demeanor had transformed entirely. Amanda's approach was now professional, warm, and respectful. It was as though she had shaken off an old skin and was stepping into something new. "Thank you," Lisa replied, maintaining her calm composure. "I'm curious to see how things have changed." Amanda glanced down briefly, as if to brace herself, but then smiled again. "I really hope you notice a difference. We've all been working hard on improving." Lisa didn't say anything, but she couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in Amanda's eyes. There was a vulnerability there now, a humility that had not been present before. The girl had clearly internalized the lessons she had learned, even if she wasn't fully at ease yet. Lisa had to admit it was a start, but it was just that, a start. The evening proceeded in quiet harmony. The meal was flawless from the appetizer to the main course. The wine pairings were perfectly matched, and the service was more polished than Lisa had remembered. Amanda, though clearly nervous, seemed to be doing everything right, moving swiftly and with grace, her interactions with Lisa sincere and warm. She didn't hesitate to check in at just the right moments, ensuring everything was perfect without being obtrusive. There was still the occasional ripple of tension, a fleeting moment where Amanda would glance nervously at Lisa, as if searching for signs of disapproval. But those moments were brief, and each time they happened, Lisa only smiled in response, offering no indication that she was judging. "How is everything tonight?" Amanda asked after Lisa had taken a few bites of her main course. "Perfect," Lisa replied, her tone neutral. "No complaints." Amanda's eyes brightened, and she stood a little straighter. It was as if Lisa's approval, or lack thereof, was still the ultimate test for her. Lisa could see that Amanda was trying so hard to prove herself, to show that she had truly changed. The evening went on, and Lisa could feel her own cynicism beginning to dissipate. It was clear that Amanda had, at least for the moment, embraced her role with newfound humility and professionalism. The transformation wasn't immediate. There were still little awkward moments, slight missteps, but there was genuine growth. The manager, Richard, stopped by briefly to check in on Lisa, offering his apologies for the previous experience and thanking her again for her help in guiding the restaurant toward better practices. He seemed sincere, and Lisa could sense that he, too, was invested in making real changes. As the meal came to a close, Lisa was content. There had been no false promises, no empty gestures. This wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was progress. She sat back in her chair, taking a moment to consider how she felt. It wasn't just about the meal, or the ambience, or even the staff's performance. It was about the way the restaurant had responded to criticism, and how it had chosen to learn and grow. There was power in that kind of change, in taking accountability and transforming mistakes into something better. The restaurant and its staff had been given a second chance, and they were taking it seriously. Amanda returned with the bill, her hands slightly trembling as she placed it on the table. "Thank you for your patience and understanding," she said quietly. "It means a lot." Lisa smiled at her, more kindly than before. "It's a good start, Amanda. But remember, the work doesn't stop here. You have to keep proving it every day." Amanda nodded, her eyes sincere. "I know. I will." As Lisa left the restaurant, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. The change wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a perfect reversal of all the harm that had been done, but it was a step in the right direction. And sometimes that's all that was needed, a willingness to change, to admit mistakes, and to grow. The restaurant still had a long road ahead, but tonight, Lisa saw a glimpse of hope. And that was enough. A few weeks passed since Lisa's last visit to La Belle Cuisine, and though life continued on, something had subtly shifted in the city's culinary scene. It was impossible for those who were tuned in to the rhythms of fine dining to ignore the whispers about the once-vaunted restaurant. The critics had not yet spoken, but the guests? They had already begun to notice. The reviews were more positive, the staff more polished, the atmosphere less pretentious. Lisa had returned to her usual routine of reviewing restaurants, of attending gala dinners, and of fielding calls from restaurateurs seeking advice. But she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play here. La Belle Cuisine wasn't just a restaurant. It was a microcosm of what could happen when people were willing to listen, when they were willing to change. One late afternoon, Lisa sat at her desk, sifting through emails when she received another one from Richard, the manager of La Belle Cuisine. It was brief, to the point, but it struck a chord. "Dear Lisa, I wanted to personally invite you to join us once again, to experience how the changes have developed further. This time, the dinner is on us, and we hope it will be an evening that leaves you not only satisfied but truly impressed. Regards, Richard Braxton." Lisa sat back in her chair, reading the words carefully. She didn't need to go. She didn't need to inspect the changes any longer. She had already seen enough to know that the restaurant had made progress. But there was a part of her, a small part, that was curious to see where the journey had taken them. Without hesitation, she picked up the phone and called the restaurant. "Good evening. This is Lisa Johnson," she said when the hostess answered. "I'll be coming in tonight. I believe there's a table waiting for me." When Lisa arrived that evening, it was as if she was walking into a completely different world. The ambience was the same, elegant and understated, but there was something in the air that felt different. The staff, as always, looked polished and professional, but tonight there was a certain warmth to their demeanor. It was as though the restaurant had finally found a balance between luxury and humility. Richard greeted her at the door, a warm smile on his face, and shook her hand firmly. "Lisa, thank you for coming again. I can't tell you how much it means to us that you've given us a second chance. We've been working hard, and tonight I hope you'll see it." Lisa nodded, her eyes scanning the room. The place felt lighter. The tension that had once hung in the air like a dark cloud had dissipated. Even Amanda, the waitress who had once treated her with disdain, was there, now carrying herself with confidence and professionalism. She didn't seem nervous, didn't glance at Lisa as though expecting judgment. Instead, she walked up with a smile, her voice steady. "Good evening, Ms. Johnson. It's a pleasure to have you back." "Thank you," Lisa replied, her tone more relaxed than it had been the first time she'd visited. "I'm glad to see things have improved." The meal began, and it was evident that the kitchen had stepped up its game. The dishes were refined, creative, and expertly executed. The flavors were balanced, the textures sublime. It was a dinner that spoke volumes about the talent of the chefs, but it was the service, the way the team moved as a cohesive unit, that truly impressed Lisa. As she sat back in her chair after the main course, Lisa looked around the restaurant. The staff was working together seamlessly, and for the first time, there were no whispers or awkward glances behind the scenes. The change that Lisa had hoped for had truly taken root. The inclusion training had worked. The staff no longer judged customers based on their appearances or social status. They were simply treating everyone with the respect they deserved. Amanda returned to Lisa's table for the final course, a delicate dessert that was as beautiful as it was delicious. "How was everything tonight?" she asked, her tone professional but sincere. "It was excellent," Lisa said, smiling at Amanda. "Everything. The food, the service. It's clear that the changes have made a difference." Amanda's eyes softened, and she gave a slight, appreciative nod. "Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. We've all worked really hard to make this a better place for everyone." The words were simple, but there was something powerful about them. Amanda wasn't just serving a customer anymore. She was part of a team that had learned from its mistakes and was now building something better, something more inclusive, something truly worthy of the praise it had once been promised. As Lisa finished her meal, Richard stopped by once again, this time with a bottle of the restaurant's finest wine. "We'd like to offer you this," he said, pouring the wine with a flourish. "As a thank you for pushing us to be better." Lisa raised her glass, her gaze meeting Richard's. "I appreciate it, Richard, but the real thanks should go to you and your team. You took the challenge and turned it into an opportunity. That's more than I could have hoped for." He smiled, a real, genuine smile that carried with it the weight of a man who had put in the work to make his restaurant not just a place to eat, but a place where people felt seen and valued. As Lisa stood to leave, she could see the entire restaurant, the staff, the chefs, the waiters, all quietly watching her, waiting for her final judgment. She didn't need to say anything more. The changes were evident in every corner, from the way the plates were presented to the way the staff carried themselves. This was no longer the La Belle Cuisine she had visited a month ago. It had evolved into something better, something more compassionate, more respectful. "Thank you for everything," Lisa said to Richard and Amanda as she walked towards the door. "I'll be sure to let everyone know that La Belle Cuisine has earned its place back on the map." As she stepped out into the cool evening air, Lisa felt a sense of peace. There would always be restaurants that failed to learn, that didn't listen to their critics. But there would also be places like La Belle Cuisine, places that, when given the chance, were capable of growing and changing for the better. And that, in the end, was all she could ask for. Lisa didn't need to write a review. She didn't need to tell the world how La Belle Cuisine had redeemed itself. The staff already knew. The diners already knew. And for Lisa, that was enough. Sometimes, the true power of change wasn't in the grand gestures, but in the quiet moments when people realized their mistakes and made the choice to do better. And in that, Lisa Johnson had found a kind of quiet satisfaction that no review could ever capture. The restaurant had not only been saved, it had been transformed.